All right, I'm Nick. Today we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to try to make the video pretty quick compared to what it could be. And we're going to compare the Old Town Sportsman 120 PDL to the Old Town Sportsman Bigwater 132 PDL. Just like the last video when we did the comparison between the Salty and the Sportsman 120, I'm going to put up two photos right here and then we'll compare them. I do have some notes and I do have the photos on my cell phone, so I can reference them just to give you guys the best thing. Now, I will say that both kayaks are great kayaks. Depending on where you live, where you fish, one will suit you better. Even how you store the kayak, your ability to store the kayak, your ability to transport the kayak, these things will suit you better. So we'll try to go over all of that stuff. All right, let's get started. We'll go front to back. Here are the two photos. And on the left, we'll have the Sportsman 120. On the right, we'll have the Bigwater. We'll keep them there. So, like I said, I have the photos on here. And we'll start with the front, and that's the handles, okay? This is one of the first things I always point out to people is the fact that the handles aren't created equal. I really prefer the Bigwater handle. It's molded into the kayak. You can grab it. You can wrap a rope around it. You can pull on it with all your power. It's attached to the kayak. It does not break. It does not flex. It does not fail. And it makes a huge difference when you're trying to pull the kayak out of a situation like the surf. Maybe the surf is rough. Maybe there's a big drop off and you need to pull that kayak up there. The flexible handle on the Sportsman 120 PDL, it's not a bad handle. It's just not rigid, right? And it's anchored to the kayak with 4 screws, and it's just not a firm thing. You grab it, and that gray plastic piece will actually, it'll flex, and the gray plastic piece will like pop out. I had that happen on multiple occasions, whether it was with the Sportsman 120 PDL or the Minn Kota, the Sportsman Minn Kota version. They have the same handle. Kayaks are a little bit too heavy, and when you're dragging them up that hill across the sand, there's friction, makes it even heavier. It just changes everything, and that flexible handle just doesn't do it for me. So I definitely prefer that. If you're going to be in a situation where maybe the terrain is nasty, rocky, sandy, there's a hill, and you really need to pull on the kayak, that's something to consider, okay? And we should have backtracked. We probably should have started with how heavy the kayaks are, right? And now to get back into this. The handle plays a big part of this. The Sportsman 120 and the Bigwater are both 36 inches wide, okay? The Sportsman 120, although over a foot shorter at 12 foot, is 116 pounds. Now, the Bigwater is 13 foot 2 inches and is listed as 122 pounds on Old Town's website. So that's 6 pounds. That for over a foot of kayak length, the 6 pound difference doesn't come out in favor of the Sportsman 120, in my opinion. The bigger kayak, the Bigwater, is actually easier to move because of the front handle, the location, and how rigid it is. So spent a long time on handles, but that's a really, really big factor that's overlooked, okay? Capacity of both kayaks full capacity is 500 pounds. Usable capacity, as in like what you can put in the kayak and your body weight. What you do is you take the max capacity and you subtract the weight of the boat. So for usable capacity on the 120, it is 384 pounds, which is a lot of weight, right? And then it is 378 pounds on the Bigwater. That if you're a big boy, that's going to matter to you, okay? If you're going to try to add a trolling motor to it and a battery, that's going to matter. I wouldn't do either of those. I wouldn't put a trolling motor and battery on it, okay? So we made it past handles, weight, all that good stuff. Now we're going to roll into the PDL. Let's do roll back. The hatches are the same, okay? They're held on their bungees. The old system was a lock and seal, but I guess it's gone forever, right? The bungees do the job. I'm not a real big fan. Sometimes you can get treble hooks stuck on them. Things happen. Just be aware of that. The PDL drive on both systems does mount the same way. It uses those locking knobs in the front. You guys can see very, very easily. You're probably familiar with that. Simple system. Easy to replace if you break it, which is great. It's fairly cheap to replace it. I think we sell them on the website, but it's only like $3 to replace those mounting knobs. The The difference between the 120 and the Bigwater, if you look closely, is the Bigwater has 2 mounting plates, so you can mount accessories up there, whether you want to put your fish finder out there for some reason, or a GoPro mount, or a net holder. Those is just extra room. They took advantage of that room and they put a way to install stuff that actually is elevated, and there's a gap in there, and you can actually put your fish finder wires in there. That's why there's a little groove if you look real close, okay? That's not a big plus or minus in my mind. It's just extra room. They took advantage of it. Let's see here. Next. The next thing I like to point out is the track mount, right? So this the 120 has track rails, right? And it gets a bad rap for them being flimsy. On the Bigwater, it is a 1/2 inch thick or 3/8 inch thick piece of plastic with holes drilled in it and a slot. It's way sturdier, okay? So you're not going to have problems with trolling or downriggers or anything like that compared to the 120, where it's just a real small piece of injection molded plastic. It's much flimsier. It's not nearly as strong. The other benefit to the system on the Bigwater is you can just drill holes in it, right? You can just drill holes into it and mount anything that you want to mount to it. You don't necessarily have to use that T-track, and they're replaceable. So say you drill too many holes in it, you're not happy with what you did, you can reach out to Old Town and you can order or buy new ones and just remove 4 screws and replace that. Now it's the same for the front and the back, which is pretty significant in my mind, and another reason that I prefer the Bigwater. Obviously I made a living fishing from the Bigwater. I used it because I thought it was the best available platform to me, okay? We can move on back down to the PDL drive system. Now, the drive systems, they're actually a little bit different. Now, things that are different, and I'll show you a video of this. The bar mounts to a piece of plastic on the 120, and you can see here it flexes, it's not rigid. On the Bigwater, it is metal and it is rigid, okay? Not a huge difference, but when it comes to lowering and lifting the drive, I prefer the metal version. There's no flex, there's no give. It comes down in a linear motion every time. Makes a difference to me. The 2 drives are not swappable, right? They won't fit in other kayak. I get that question a lot. Hey, I have this kayak. Will my drive fit over here? It does not, okay? Other thing, the storage bin on the Bigwater is bigger than the top water. It's just deeper and wider. You have more room to put your phones, whistles, whatever you need to put in there you want to keep in close reach, some kind of tools to work on the drive, whatever you want to put in there. There's just more room, okay? Which won't matter to everybody, but when I was running the guide business, it was nice to be able to keep stuff in there that I know I wanted to get to quickly, whether it was a GoPro or my cell phone or clients' wallets and clients' keys. Sometimes we get to the beach and they'd have extra stuff, and if you put it in that dry bin, you can lock it. It's going to be there the whole time, and that makes a big difference. One of the next things to talk about is C-deck. The 120 has C-deck right where your feet go. The Predator has a little bit more, or the Bigwater, sorry, has a little bit more C-deck on it. Not a deal breaker for anybody by any means. It's just a bigger kayak. You have more room, right? That's that. Come back down to the side handles. Now, side handles are flexible on both kayaks. It's the same handle they put on the front of the 120. Same thing. You know, I can spend much time lifting from there, but if they were built in better or something like that, maybe it would matter. It doesn't make a difference to me. We usually replace them with the side handle we make, and we mount our fish finders there. After that, each kayak has 3 flush-mounted rod holders. Those flush-mounted rod holders are in different positions, right? On the Bigwater, the front facing, it points forward, right? So your rod sticks out in front of the kayak. It is on your right hand out in front of you, out in front of the side handle, which I actually prefer it there because it's out of your way. Like when you put the rod out there in that spot, the rod's out of your way. It's linear with the kayak. It's facing forward. It's not sticking left or right. And it makes for a good spot, right? Now on the 120, it is behind the steering assembly, your left hand behind the steering assembly. And if you put a rod in there, depending on how tall you are and where you sit, where the seat is on the track, your hand is gonna, or elbow, or you have to go around I've had to go around the rod holder, or rod to steer. So it's not a great storage spot for that rod. In my opinion, I prefer to have it up front in the right. I may be a little biased towards the Bigwater, but I used it because I thought it was a better platform, and these are the reasons that I still think it's a better platform, okay? Coming back, once you get past that, kind of starts to even out. Rod holders is a big one for me, okay? But after that, you have 2 rear-facing flush mount rod holders. We already touched on the track system. The track system is just sturdier on the Bigwater, okay? Tons and tons of cargo space in the back for both of the kayaks. Scupper holes back there, so it drains, no issues. Now you could come back and you could say, I'll give this advantage to the 120, and that is the power pole mounting location, right? It is offset to the left rear at an angle, and the biggest advantage of that is safety feature, right? So power pole has a safety feature. You can pull a pin and the system will tilt up in case it quits working for some reason. On the Bigwater, if you look, the power pole mount is dead center, and they put a small hole in the back of the kayak, and the pole goes through that hole, which is really cool design, right? You need to adjust your rudder a little bit so it stands straight up, which could be a negative as well. But it was a cool idea, cool thought, but the only thing it didn't account for was the safety feature, right? The power pole micro, from time to time they fail, maybe the battery dies, maybe it comes unplugged, and it's stuck in a down position. Well, you can't, if you use the breakaway, you pull a little pin and it's supposed to tip backwards so it comes undone and the kayak will move forward, and then at least you're free to move while you try to sort the problem. Well, it can't tilt backwards if it's in that hole, right? So that kind of traps the system. So if you had a failure, you'd have to get out of the kayak or climb across the kayak to try to get to it. And 9 times out of 10, if you have a power pole, you probably have, a whole bunch of rods behind you crawling through the back of the kayak is not exactly an option. So you probably have to go swimming to fix that issue. So I do give that plus to the 120 PDL. It is a better system. Now, the rear of the kayak now this year, 2020, the kayaks are a lot different. When they first released the 120, it didn't have any handles back there and had a little flexible side handle in the rear, and it was hard to carry. Now they've gone and changed the design so there's molded in handles, so when you're behind the kayak you can just pick it up like you'd grab a table or anything like that. That's real nice. The Bigwater is the same way. The firm, I'm grabbing solid plastic, really makes a big difference when it comes down to ease of moving these kayaks. Now, we touched on the weight at the beginning a little bit, and we'll take these pictures away. For being a foot shorter, it only weighs 6 pounds lighter. The 120 is only 6 pounds lighter than the Bigwater, and that's, although you think that difference would be larger, it's not, and it's not a huge deal breaker, but the 120 is harder to move around than the Bigwater, in my opinion. And you could go in, we could touch on the bottom of the kayaks real quick. The bottom of the 120 is, they call it a W-shaped hull, right? Like it goes like this, and it's flat, right? If you lay it on your garage, it's going to sit there flat. It's stable, very stable system. It turns a little slower. It's not as maneuverable. Being a foot shorter helps, but it's still not as maneuverable. It's a little bit slower. It pushes through the water. Then you come back to the 132 and it's shaped, kind of, it does like a number like this. I don't know what it's called, right? But it's faster. It's very maneuverable, but it's tippy, okay? Stability isn't the greatest right now. It's fantastic. Just in the world of kayak stability these days, it's not the greatest because it wasn't built for stability. It was built for an experienced group of kayakers who understood this kayak is designed to go do this, this, and this, not sit in a kayak and then lean over here somewhere. If you put your head over here, you're going to fall out of the kayak. It's not a pontoon boat. It's not a dock. Those are really differences in the bottom. Speed comes into play with that. And I know we're going to ramble a bit about that stuff. It's just things that you need to hear in details and not just a 30-second marketing ad, right? I'm a big fan of the 132. If you have the room to store it, and you need 13.5 feet, right, which is quite a bit of room for some folks. If you don't have a garage, you need a place to store it. Some people put them in storage centers. Some people put them underneath their carports or wherever they can put them in their shed. That makes a big difference in your decision. I just wouldn't factor weight into it because it's not that big of a deal. It's not a big enough difference, okay? I know we rambled a bit. I know I probably missed a few things that I wanted to touch on. The video is going to get pretty long here, and I didn't want it to happen. I wanted to keep it as short as possible. So if you guys have questions and the differences, let me know. Leave a comment below. Let me know your perspective. Everyone has a different thought on it. You guys go leave comments. It really helps other people with their purchasing decision, okay? So leave some comments about your thoughts. Which kayak do you prefer? Which one do you use? Have you used both? Just let us know in the comment section. Appreciate you guys taking the time to watch.